Erica Rogers isn't the typical CEO story in the healthcare industry.
My official title was VP Vice President of Marketing. But it's the two of us.
Right.
So you're literally doing everything. You're doing some HR, you're designing a clinical trial on Tuesday, and then Saturday you're literally cleaning the floor and emptying the trash cans.
But at the end, the company was sold for $400 million, so pretty good overall exit. Tell me a little bit about that startup, and that one unfortunately didn't have a happy ending.
It was really terrible, and I thought my career was over, and I couldn't even get people to return my phone calls.
Because
I was persona non grata. That gave me an opportunity, though, to go do one of the most important things I've ever done. So we will fail fast. And I think that's one of the most important principles to get across to people is how can you fail faster?
Right.
Cartwheel culture is the X factor. It is the secret sauce.
Yes.
It is the thing that separates one company from the next.
After more than a decade at Boston Scientific, Erica took the leap into entrepreneurship, co-founding an ophthalmology company, which ultimately had a successful exit. Her second attempt, though, wasn't as successful. The clinical trial failed, the funding dried up, and she had to make the tough decision to close the doors. But that experience sharpened her as a leader, and it set the foundation for what came next, Silk Road Medical. Over the next decade, she led the company through clinical validation and early adoption, while managing a tough hands-on board and the IPO process. In this deeply candid conversation, Erica Rogers talks about the value of big company training, the reality of founder doubt, and how failure can redefine you. No Spotlight Needed is proud to welcome Erica Rogers. So let's talk about your background a little bit. Grew up in San Diego.
Yeah.
Went to San Diego State University. Tell me a little about how you grew up, your parents, et cetera.
Yeah. So I grew up in San Diego, which was, all that you think it is when you grow up in San Diego. It's all about the beach. It's all about being outside all the time. So it was a great life of just lots of outdoor activities. There was a lot of focus on outdoors and nature, which is still a big part of me now today. Yeah. But the other thing that San Diego had was this really great theater program for children. And so I got into theater as a really young kid, theater and dance and musical theater and singing and, all of that stuff. And taking all the dance lessons and ballet and tap and, all of that. And so it was just this sort of great mix of, a nice, humble background, performing in theater, and and living the dream at the beach in San Diego.
So I've asked the question to some guests, were you an athlete, a artist, an academic, or other? But I get the sense from you, you kind of go across a couple of them.
I would say at that time, I would definitely be in the artist category.
Okay.
I mean, I was much more comfortable in ballet class than I was running track and field.
So maybe shifting to your career a little bit, you spent the first 10 to 12 years, I think, of your kind of early career at Boston Scientific. I think doing a couple of sales and marketing roles, if my understanding. What would you say is the value of big company sort of experience?
I am so glad you asked me that because so many people I talk to are fresh out of college, or maybe they've worked a couple of years and they're ready to go do a startup and even be a founder of a startup. And, a lot of the kids who are, say, at Stanford Biodesign and programs like that, who are going to launch right into an early stage company, unfortunately suffer from not knowing what it's supposed to look like. Right. And what was great about Boston Scientific and companies like Boston Scientific is that you know what it looks like when it's good. You know what it looks like when you get there. You have an idea of what you're building toward. And these companies offer the most amazing training programs. They're deep. It's everything from anatomy and disease state physiology and product knowledge, but it's also selling skills and leadership skills and all of the rest of it. And in a company like Boston Scientific, you also get a cross-functional exposure. So I was leading product marketing teams where you had regulatory and clinical and all of the functions, R&D, that were part of your team. And it was all kind of dotted line and cross-functional. So you got a sense of what it would be like to lead all of these different disciplines within the company.
But at some point, did you say to yourself, I don't want to stay at the big company. I want to kind of do my own, not own thing, but go to something
Right.
smaller?
Right. Well, so I'll tell the story. So I was working on intracranial aneurysm repair. Long story, but I had gone to Target Therapeutics, which was phenomenal in the early days where Target was really pioneering the coiling of aneurysms and the less invasive approach to treating intracranial aneurysms. From there, I was being recruited, we'll get to that probably, to go work at a venture capital firm as an entrepreneur in residence. But Boston Scientific had meanwhile purchased Target Therapeutics. Now I'm back at Boston.
Right.
So there was
just
like
a couple
full
months
circle
later,
moment.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Like 72 days later, but who's counting?
Right.
So I'm back at Boston, and now I'm being recruited to go do something else. And a really dear friend of mine who's just a great entrepreneur in our field asked me, Erica, if 100% of the aneurysms in the world were coiled versus clipped, what would happen to the Boston Scientific stock? And I said, well, nothing. Because the stock and the value of Boston really hinged on coronary artery disease.
Right.
That was the underpinning of that company at that time. And so my ability to really have an influence on the greater company was pretty de minimis. And that really brought into focus this idea of, look, I want to do something that's more impactful and spread my wings a little bit. So that's what led to me leaving ultimately.
Yeah. So you mentioned private equity or venture capital, and I think you became an executive in residence. What is that? I never even heard that term.
Well, I was an entrepreneur in residence. There's a difference slightly between executive and residence. Executive in residence is sort of a plug-and-play CEO that's ready to go lead something that venture firm is going to invest in, say. Entrepreneur in residence is this like blank slate position where you're tasked with looking across a number of disease states and figuring out where are the unmet clinical needs in those disease states. And potentially inventing your own concepts and ideas, potentially putting a company together and spinning that company out. And that's in fact what we did. So one of the areas that we were focused on, I was partnered with this genius man with an engineering background who's one of my dearest friends today. Reza, sad now. Yeah, he's a legend. You should have him on this show, by the way. He's amazing.
I will try.
So Reza and I were partnered together, and Reza, of course, is a technical genius and just, a genius, period. And we were looking at ophthalmology and where were the unmet needs in ophthalmology. And at that time, there was a real focus on accommodating and the loss of accommodation with presbyopia. And so that's what we ended up doing.
So you guys together founded VizioJen.
Yeah.
Now, maybe before we even go down that road, did it matter to you that it was outside of the neurovascular space or cardiovascular space? Were you just open to anything? Well,
yes, we were open to anything, but I will say it was pretty terrifying. I mean, this was one of the most, I would say, or least confident moments of my career because I'd taken this giant leap of faith that I could even do this job. And I was very aware that if I failed, there was probably very little turning back. Like it'd be hard to pivot back and go get a, corporate role, I think, after that. And so it was a high stakes game of making sure that you could live up to this challenge of finding an unmet need across all of medicine.
Yeah.
So yes, I was extraordinarily nervous, but I did what I always do, which is lots and lots and lots of homework. I mean, I'm just one of those people who massively over prepares. And so, we'd pick a topic, let's say presbyopia, and I would spend all nights and weekends just studying up on what that meant, right? And becoming knowledgeable and seeking out people to talk to and all of that. So it was very nerve-wracking. And then the idea of forming a company. I mean, from scratch.
Yeah.
From, rent the building to, get a name, incorporate, hire people. I mean, the list goes on and on. So my understanding is he was CEO and you were VP of everything else.
Right, a VP of everything else. Well, what is VP of everything else?
No. I was my official title was VP, Vice President of Marketing. But, it's the two of us.
Right.
So you're literally doing everything. You're doing some HR, you're designing a clinical trial on Tuesday, you're talking to the FDA and thinking about your regulatory submissions on Wednesday. On Thursday, you're looking at health plans for the entire company and figuring out what the insurance is going to look like. And then on Friday, you're meeting with the R&D engineers and you're figuring out what equipment they need and how we're going to build out this lab and, whatever. So, and then Saturday, you're literally cleaning the floor and emptying the trash cans. So like, it's all of it.
Yeah, it's everything.
In those early days. But of course, the marketing component and developing physician relationships, going deep into ophthalmology, understanding that space, what would it take to sell, what's it like to work in these, surgery center type environments that are owned and operated by ophthalmologists, all of that stuff that a marketing person would do, market access, all of it.
So you were there for about 4 years. I think you had to leave for more personal reasons. But at the end, the company was sold for $400 million. So pretty good overall exit.
Yeah, great exit. Yeah.
Well,
there were a couple of things going on. One is I was commuting from the Bay to Southern California. And that's not really sustainable Monday through Friday, although Reza did it, God bless him, for a long time. But it was very hard on relationships, all of it. That was very hard. And then secondly, I was getting the itch to kind of do it again, right? Start something new again. And so it was the same, essentially the same group of venture people who said, well, let's prop you up again and let's incubate. Let's do this again.
Right. So this is Alex Medical.
Right. This is how Alex was formed.
And so Alex was ENT devices for inflammatory diseases. And so tell me a little bit about that startup. And that one, unfortunately, didn't have a happy ending.
Right. It did not have a happy ending at all, but it was a phenomenal experience. So this idea that there could be interventional procedures done by allergists or ENT docs, otolaryngologists, was kind of just coming into fruition. It was just becoming an idea, but it was really novel and enticing because this whole broad area of interventional medicine could open up potentially.
Yeah.
And so, again, I was partnered with a more technical person. In this case, it was a clinician who was an entrepreneur in residence alongside me, and we were being funded by this venture group of venture capitalists. And we stumbled upon some patents and a company in Europe that was using ultraviolet light to downregulate the immune system in the anterior airway. So in the nose and in the sinuses. And they had published a paper in a very high impact factor journal of allergy and immunology. And we were really intrigued by that. Like, they showed some real clinical effort or clinical efficacy, and they were marketing this device in Europe. So they were selling it to ENTs in Europe. So, through lots of negotiation, we end up negotiating the rights, forming Alex Medical, and basically putting together the same device that they had, but taking into account some of the safety considerations that FDA might have that would be different, user interface stuff, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we quickly get into a clinical trial. And we're going to run a randomized controlled, sham-controlled clinical trial during peak allergy season in Texas in 350 people.
Okay.
So really well-powered study.
Yeah.
And we're super excited because we're like, this is a slam dunk. Right. There's already a published paper. Right? This is going to be great. So we go do that trial, and we had raised about $12 million in venture by that point, and the trial utterly failed. Long story short, the lesson here for entrepreneurs is believe the data. And a post hoc analysis of data is only going to lead to a rabbit hole of continuous demise, is what I learned, right? And so, and this was also kind of during the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. And so companies that were like us, that were still trying to figure it out, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not going to work, we were not going to get funded. And so it was obvious. We had to close the doors. And I went on a hike with a guy a fellow entrepreneur, and he said, you know, Erica, the answer is obvious. You have to lead the board to that answer. So the next day we had a board meeting and I sat him down and I said, we're going to close the doors.
Wow.
We brought in 50 people that were employed there and sent them all home.
Were the investors also on board? I mean, or did they think, hey, listen, we can still resurrect this technology?
No, they were on board because at that time, what was happening is they were having to pick in their portfolios the winners and losers. Because it's like 2009, right?
Yes.
And money's hard to come by. LPs are, you know, scrambling. So these venture funds have to do more with less. And they're going to pick in their portfolio, they're going to cut their losses, and they're going to pick the companies that they think are well on their way to success and continue to deploy capital there. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
So everybody was on board. It was incredibly painful. But it was one of the times where I understood the value of corporate culture and company culture. Because after I laid everybody off, of course, then I'm stuck with the job of unwinding the whole company. Like you have all this stuff. You have to get rid of desks and computers and data and HIPAA protected data and, you know, on and on and on. I mean, you can't just throw all that stuff in the trash.
Right.
Right. There's a whole wind down process and you actually have to hire a company to wind it down, which is expensive. So we were doing that. And I showed up the next day. I pulled in the parking lot and there was like 8 cars in the parking lot. And then there were 12 and then there were 20. And basically almost everybody came back with no pay to help me wind it down.
Wow.
And they did it because we were just this incredible team that was glued together around the mission of what we were doing.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's maybe the launch, the stepstone for culture later on.
Exactly.
How did that failure, how did that make you feel? How did you think about that over the next year after it shut its doors?
I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. There was a lot of soul searching around, this is probably the end of me. Because first of all, first time CEO, right? Complete disaster. People said it was crazy to begin with, right? There was a lot of skepticism around what we were doing to begin with. And same with VizioJen, by the way. There was a lot of skepticism there, and that one worked out okay.
Yeah.
So I think you can't let that deter you as a founder when the whole world's like, nobody's ever done that before, or I'm not sure that's going to work. That's what founders do. They plow through that feeling. But here I was in the face of this disaster. It was really terrible. And I thought my career was over. And I couldn't even get people to like return my phone calls. Because I was persona non grata. It was like, you know, and so that gave me an opportunity though to go do one of the most important things I've ever done, which was ultimately work a little bit in nanotechnology, which was super interesting. But from there, went and did a nonprofit pharmaceutical company that had a really strong mission that I believed in. And I kind of hid out and, you know, was trying to change the world in a totally different way through a nonprofit. Yeah. And, you know, spent 4 years kind of licking my wounds.
So Medicines 360 is that nonprofit. We'll come back to that maybe after the Silk Road story. But, licking wounds is a really strong. Yeah. But it was a failed clinical trial. Yeah. Right? It wasn't something that you did. You didn't run the company into the ground.
No, it's true. But, you know, I think as a founder and as a CEO, we're always second guessing everything, every single one of our decisions. And, you know, I always tell people one of the hardest parts about leading is that you make decisions with 50 to 80% at best of the information that you need to make a quality decision. So you're, 50 to 20% of what you're doing is guessing. And you make it seem like you're not guessing, right? You're like the strong and powerful CEO. And you're, saying this is the way it's going to be and this is the where we're going. But in the back of your mind, there's all this doubt because you know that you actually don't have all the information you need. Yeah. And even though it seemed like a layup, there was a clinical trial that was published in this reputable journal. How hard can this be? Of course this works, right? it seemed like a layup. But looking back on it, and in that dark desert of wandering the desert for those few years of wondering, will I ever get back on track, on the main track? I was loving the track I was on, but will I ever get back on the main track?
Yeah.
There was a lot of second guessing, and I was checking in on my own skepticism and those moments of doubt, which we all have as founders.
Sure.
But I was like over-indexing on those moments of doubt after the failure.
Yeah. It's inevitable, I suppose. So you're happy at Medicines 360.
Yes.
And does Silk Road come knocking on your door? How did that come about?
Yeah, it literally came knocking on my door. One of the founders and VCs that was around the table at Silk Road in the early days, really the company that founded Silk Road. It sort of hatched out of a venture firm, the Vertical Group, contacted me. They had gotten my name from another VC who ironically had never invested in me, but knew that I had this neurovascular background. And they were looking for somebody with neuro and carotid artery experience to potentially come lead this thing called Silk Road Medical, which was doing this very novel thing. And it was Warburg Pincus and the Vertical Group, two really esteemed, very well known in our category. And at first, I turned it down.
You did.
And the reason I turned it down is that there had been so much roadkill in carotid disease. But I also, did not want to turn down those two very important investor groups.
Because that might close the door towards anything in the future.
Forever. And number two, I said to myself, this crazy thing that they are doing is either going to work or it's going to be a total disaster. And we will know early. So we will fail fast. And I think that's one of the most important principles to get across to people is how can you fail faster?
Right.
And we could have failed faster, I think, at Alex too. We didn't need to spend all $12 million in 4 or 5 years getting to where we got to. But at Silk Road, I knew, look, in pretty short order, it's going to be binary. It's either going to be yes or no.
Right.
And the outcome measures were pretty black and white. They were safety measures. So it felt like low risk. Also, these investors have a reputation of kind of churning through CEOs because they're very tough. And the things they do are oftentimes moonshots to begin with, right? So I was like, well, maybe this will only work out for a couple of years, but I'll learn a lot and I'll be back out in the mainstream.
Well, there you go. So, because Silk Road at this point, I think had been around since 2007.
Yeah.
Right. Founded in 2007.
So it was like 3.5, 4 years old when I started looking at it.
Yeah. So you joined, I think there was 25 employees.
Yeah.
And
roughly.
And I think you had said a pretty poor culture.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like what was poor about the culture when you came, when you walked in the doors?
It's such a funny thing about culture because it doesn't mean that the people are bad. It just means that the way that everyone kind of was interacting and the way that information was shared and just the vibe of the place was negative. And some of that was because there was backstabbing. There was that thing that people do when they want power or need power, which is they hold their cards and they don't share what they know. Because if I hold those cards and I don't share what I know, then I have all the power. So there was some of that going on. And, we were going to need to be in lockstep as a company if we were going to change the world, which is what we were trying to do.
Sure.
Change the world, literally. Create a brand new category where none had existed previously. And so the first thing I did was kind of thin the place out. And that did not help my reputation.
I'm sure
this is a true story. I have to tell you the story. This is a true story. The very first Christmas party, I'm there like 2.5 months. I've fired, I don't know, half the company by then. I might be exaggerating, but it's a lot of people have exited.
It was only 25.
Right. There were a lot of people that exited. It's the company Christmas party. It's at a restaurant. And there's these round tables of like 6 or 8 people. I get there with my husband. I hardly know anyone as it is because I've only been there a couple months. Of the 14 people who are left or whatever, they're all sitting at 2 tables and there's not a chair left. But there's 1 table left with 6 chairs and no one in it.
So you didn't even make the table.
I didn't even get invited to the table.
Yikes.
I know. But one of my dear friends to this day in this industry she got up. I hardly knew her then.
Yeah.
She got up and came, and she and her husband, and came and sat with us. So there were 4 of us at an 8-top table, and the rest of the tables were full. And so,
Everybody, the boss walks in and
right. They're like, oh God, it's her. She's like the Wicked Witch of the West. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. So when I think about how we started and where we ended, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But, and then we just built back the team with this vision and kind of hand-picking one person at a time and making sure that they were the kind of people who could and wanted to be on this journey.
Yeah. So in the early days, as essentially a founder almost, right? How do you prioritize? Like, what are the things that you had to really focus on? And maybe related to that is when you had to rehire, what backgrounds were you looking for?
So the first step is really managing through the people considerations and figuring out where are the holes. And we had to get a device that worked. I mean, if you don't have a device and a system that works and is ready for prime time, you really can't move forward.
Right.
And so that became the first focus, was really what needs to happen here, what needs to change in the device. That were real safety concerns, that were usability concerns that had to be kind of re-engineered. And so I needed some really great people in R&D. And so, you do what a lot of founders do, which is you go grab people that used to be in your band.
Sure.
And you bring the band back together. And so there was some of that, is going and getting people from my past and bringing them into this new thing that I was doing. On the marketing side, I did that. In R&D, I did that. And then it's deciding as the CEO, where do you need to be really hands-on and where can you and should you be really hands-off? So once you've kind of solved the talent picture, and in my case, and I think a lot of cases, one of the most important things in our industry is market access.
Right.
And that became my purview. That became the thing I was most focused on almost from day one. And I kept that in my domain all the way to the end.
Great. You talked about bringing the band back together. One thing that I'm curious about, because, I've heard some other people say, especially when you are trying to get people to do something different, as you talked about, trying to change the paradigm for how you treated carotid artery disease. Do you bring people that have that background, or do you bring people that don't have any of that background so they can look at it brand new and try to come up with never before seen solutions?
I think in general, if you're trying to change the world and break paradigms, the latter is the best strategy. So we did that at VizioJen. We didn't know anything about ophthalmology. People said we were crazy. You can't do what you're about to go do. But we didn't know what we didn't know. So I think there's a lot of benefit in bringing in people that don't have the background. I'm on the board of a company now where we're very intentionally going to find a commercial leader who has never been in this space before, because we want to borrow from the best of the best in other industries without kind of giving that away. So I think there's a lot to be said for having no background.
Yeah.
That said, there are key roles. And in this case, one of the most genius things we did, and I can't even take the credit for it, was we brought in a world-leading physician in the field of carotid artery disease and of stroke and stroke prevention, and brought that person in as our full-time chief medical officer. And so she could walk in a room, and not only with other clinicians and future customers, but also with our team. And she could, in a second, sort of assess, is this technology or is this solution to the problem going to work or not going to work?
Yeah.
So in certain parts of the business, it's really critical to have that core competency.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to imagine this is not a sort of area where you can market your way to adoption.
No.
Yeah.
And it's life and death.
That's right.
I mean, you literally have lives and livelihoods in your hands. Every time a clinician had our devices in their hands, we had that patient's brain and their life on the line.
Yeah. One thing I did learn is in the early days of Silk Road, you had a very involved board, strong personalities. They had some strong views on how things should be done. How did you manage that in the early days?
Well, first of all, let me correct the record, which was not the early days. It was forever. That lasted forever. And I say this with all love and respect for the board. Look, there's a blessing and a curse to having really smart and really capable board members. And that is that, they want to get their hands in it sometimes. Some of them were former operators. And so there's a tendency, and I find myself doing this now that I'm on boards.
Yeah.
There's a tendency to want to get in there and operate, even though they're a board member, they're not an operator. So there's that. And there was among the board, I think, some very healthy skepticism around whether or not I and my CFO could take the company public. We'd never been a public company in anything. And so there was a lot of skepticism there. And so there was a lot of cinching in of the reins as we got closer and closer to the IPO, right? So look, it is tough to manage these boards. But what I try to explain to founders and CEOs of venture-backed and private equity-backed companies is that the biggest mistake we make is thinking that it's our company. And I would find myself saying all the time, well, it's my company. Well, my company this, my company that. Or we'd say our company if it was myself and the CFO.
Right.
It wasn't our company at all. It's their company.
The shareholders' company.
Yeah. It's always the shareholders' company. Whether you're in the private equity and venture stage or you're a public company, it's always the shareholders' company.
Yeah.
And so we get lured into thinking, well, first of all, I'm the smartest person in the room because I am the CEO and I know more about this business than anyone else could possibly know. Yeah. True, but not true, because people on the board and other people in the company and around the company had seen very similar movies before and know how the movie ends. So kind of not always true that the CEO knows all there is to know. So I think the moments where it got tense was when I was like, no, it's my company.
Right.
Hands off my company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be challenging, right? Because arguably they brought you in to help guide.
Yeah.
But they took a very heavy hand.
Yeah.
Hopefully less so in the latter days.
Yeah. But you know what? You can't argue with success. The heavy hand was painful at times. Not going to lie. There were plenty of tears at home in the dark,
Right.
Plenty of tears.
Yeah.
Literally. But at the end of the day, you can't argue with success. And failure sharpens you, for sure. All of the failures all along the way. And tough boards sharpen you.
Yeah. They ask the smart questions.
Yeah. And they're hard on you. They're really hard.
So you did talk about maybe the back and forth or tug of war on, whether to go public. Understanding you might not be able to say as much as you'd like, but my understanding is that you were approached before you went public. What's that decision-making process like? Of do we go the public route, a lot of uncertainty and the dynamics change, or do we sell to a strategic buyer and hopefully this technology is in the right hands?
Yeah. It's really such an interesting question. And I'm sure you've heard the question asked of CEOs of, early stage companies. Well, what's your goal, Erica? Is your goal to sell the company or to take it public? And the answer to that is neither of these things are the goal.
Right.
The goal is to build value. The goal is to change the practice of medicine. Along the way, we're going to need capital in order to do that. And at some point in time, we're going to need a lot of capital to do that. And probably the best place to raise a lot of capital is on the public markets. Mm-hmm. And as we just got through talking about, the people who own the company, who are our investors, need liquidity.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're invested in your company because eventually they need liquidity, need and want liquidity, and they're going to return that liquidity to their LPs.
That's right.
That's how this ecosystem works. And so you're then faced with, we have two sides of this coin. One is, how much value have we created and how much more value is there to create? And what's the risk in that versus what is the value today? And what is the risk-reward trade-off? And so when you have an opportunity to potentially sell the company, first of all, you'll end up running a process because you want to pressure test one price against another price, and you want to see who's willing to pay what at this stage. And that is the right thing to do for the shareholders at that time, which is go out, pressure test, can we sell this company today? And if so, for how much? And does that price warrant removing all the risk?
Right.
And so if you look at it really practically and you do careful, DCFs around, 5-year, 10-year, whatever long it takes you to figure out, what is the value, then you'll make an informed decision. There is an emotional component to all of this, which is first and foremost, you're exhausted, tired as a management team and as a CEO.
Sure.
And there is a lot of like, well, if I sell it now, I'll just be done. And I'll be on the beach that much sooner, right?
Yeah.
I'll be taking my 10-year-long nap to recover from this whole thing sooner. But then there's also this emotional buy-in to how great would it be to A, take the company public, because that's a cool thing to do, and it is, and B, really change the practice of medicine, like really see it all the way through. And so you're in this tug of war with yourself,
right?
Emotionally, at the same time that you're in this value tug, DCF tug of war, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously what happened in our case was the value wasn't there for an early acquisition to warrant taking all that risk off the table. We desperately wanted to change the world, and we were just getting started.
Yeah.
And so we said, we've got a lot more in us. We're not ready for the beach.
Right.
Let's go.
Let's
take the company public. Who knew there'd be a pandemic? But,
We
in
will get
2019,
there.
it seemed like a great idea to take the company public.
It wasn't, although maybe in 2020 you could have raised even more money. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But so you go public, very successful IPO. I'm just curious, before we talk about COVID.
We could skip that part.
Yeah, we can. It didn't affect you guys. It felt like as much as some other companies, of course. But I'm curious in maybe the first couple of years after you went public, because it's the first time public CEO, how did your responsibilities change? How much time did you have to spend with people like me, shareholders, right? Who are asking the same question again and again.
Yeah.
Et cetera.
I think that is the thing. That is the thing that changes, is that you, as a CEO, prior to that point, you're spending so much time on the operational excellence of the company, whatever that is. It's R&D excellence, it's, product quality excellence, it's production, it's, whatever. Excellence across the board. And then suddenly you're faced with, you now have this kind of full-time job that is IR in the broadest terms.
Sure.
Where you're talking to shareholders, you're talking to Wall Street, you're talking to analysts, you're going to banker conferences, you're doing non-deal roadshows. And keep in mind, you know this, of course, that we did 2 follow-ons, like immediately. So then you're just back on the road, and you're back on the roadshow, and you're like doing the whole IPO 2 more times.
Again, right.
Almost, right, is sort of what it feels like. So it changes a lot, but that's where or you don't know, but in my case, I knew that you have the most phenomenal team.
Right.
Because they ran the company.
Yeah.
Basically. And they are still the most phenomenal people in their fields across all the disciplines, HR and quality and R&D and clinical and professional education and, finance and all the rest. We had the best commercial, the best team on the planet.
As I fast forward to maybe 2022, 2023, you get an expanded indication. Things are looking great. So now you're in standard risk, sort of risk patients.
The Holy Grail, right?
And things are going great. And we turn the calendar to 2023, and there's some confusion on reimbursement. Or maybe not confusion, just different interpretations. Maybe that's a nicer way of saying it. That CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, says we're going to put all carotid artery stenting procedures at the same reimbursement level. What was the reaction? And were you surprised?
Right. So there was confusion. You actually had the right word.
Yeah.
There was confusion all the way around.
Yeah.
So let me just start with, yes, we got the expanded indication. So now we're indicated for everyone who has carotid artery disease. However, the way that we're reimbursed is our patients and our treatments still need to be part of a clinical trial. And we get coverage because we've got this giant clinical trial, but it's not real coverage. It's not carte blanche, which is really what we want and what we had been in conversation with CMS about since day one is unfettered access.
Yeah.
So CMS decides they're going to review the reimbursement, the coverage for all carotid artery stenting, including our procedure, which is called TCAR. And we knew that if CMS took a very hard look at all of the data, all the real world evidence, and the published, clinical trials, that we would come out on top.
Mm-hmm.
That if it was a decision around whether or not they should pay for TCAR, the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
So we're overjoyed with this news. But the street was not overjoyed with this news because there was a risk that CMS was also then going to open up coverage, reimbursement for this competitive, less invasive technology.
Right.
And so it brought about just a ton of questions on whether or not TCAR, Silk Road, was going to start to plateau.
Mm-hmm.
Was their growth going to start to plateau? That was the big overarching question. And we spent hours and hours and hours with, analysts and bankers and whatever trying to answer that. But, the proof was going to be in the pudding.
Proof in the pudding.
The proof in the pudding.
So I'm not even sure where to go next. So you have I don't know. I actually don't know what came first, your announcement to retire or a soft quarter.
Yeah. Well, what came first was we got full coverage.
Yes.
From CMS.
Yes, that was October.
And I had said to myself, I'm never leaving this company until CMS and all the payers are fully reimbursing for TCAR.
Yeah.
Like I'm staying till that point because as I told you, one of the things that I took on day one, 11 years earlier, was market access. I felt that was one of the things as a CEO that I should be very involved in, like down in the weeds, right? I'm hands off on a bunch of stuff, but not that thing.
Got it.
So I was on the front end of that spear all along. And I said, look, I'm not going to leave until we have coverage. And so finally we did, and I could start to think about, okay, now is the time. Meanwhile, my husband and I had been planning and scheming behind the scenes to eventually move out of the state. And we had bought a property. We'd been working on a slow roll remodel for a number of years. So there was, there's like some personal stuff brewing in the background. Anyway, so I have a conversation with the board that says, if we were to find the right replacement, I would consider retiring. Mm. You can't really announce that you're retiring and you can't tell everyone that you're retiring until there is a suitable replacement.
Yes.
So you're stuck in this weird communication no man's land.
Yeah.
Where you might want to retire, but you don't know. It could take 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, 2 months to find the right candidate. You don't know. So we're in that phase. And we do find a candidate. Mm-hmm. The board finds a candidate. And in the meanwhile, we have a soft-ish quarter. By normal standards, it would be a fine quarter. But the bar was high for us. And the bar was high because, frankly, MedTech companies like ours were trading at pretty high valuations. They're trading at high multiples. Mm-hmm. And we were, not EBITDA positive at this point in time. Right. So we're trading on a revenue multiple, and it was a lofty revenue multiple. And so if you're going to trade at that multiple, you have to perform like you're going to trade at that multiple. And now we have this quarter that's good, but not good enough. It didn't meet the expectations, right?
So a cloud,
and that's against this backdrop of uncertainty,
right?
Which was the real problem.
Yeah. So the cloud of what is this change in reimbursement going to mean?
Yeah.
Sales seem to be slowing,
right?
And now this rock star CEO that we came to love is retiring.
Yeah. What is going on there? That's the question.
And so
right?
people said you were pushed out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And people told me, look, when this gets announced, Erica, it's going to look like you were fired. And And I was distraught, like the worst feeling in my gut you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
11 years of your life, you created something really amazing and changed the practice of medicine and like built this amazing company that people still talk about today. And it's going to go down as I'm fired, I was kicked out, whatever that looked like optically.
Yeah.
And there was nothing I could do about it.
No.
How do you time that CEO exit? And if anyone has any great advice, I would love to know.
That's right. We'll take it.
How you do that better. But I certainly won't do it the way I did it.
Right. It seems like it was a trifecta of difficulty.
Right. And architecting it from the beginning of, I'll be ready to go when we have full coverage, full market access, seemed perfect.
Yeah.
Seemed like I'd be just like handing off this lovely growing thing.
Yes. Unfettered growth opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now that a couple years have passed, hopefully you have a different view of it.
Yes.
Right? A different view. I can't imagine that anybody looks at Silk Road and says it was not a success.
Yeah.
Because Boston Scientific came in and said, we are willing to pay $1.1 billion, $1.12 billion. That must make you feel pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once in a while, I'll run into somebody who say, why were you fired? I mean, they'll still ask me that question. And so, I spent a lot of time trying to explain it to people early on. And finally, I just said, you know what? Less is more. I wasn't fired.
Right.
I wasn't fired. I just, that's the answer.
That's right. That's right.
Get over yourself.
So as you
and by the way, I'm off doing the most exciting things now.
Yeah.
That I kind of don't care.
Well, before we get to the new things, I did want to ask, in your 10Ks, you would talk about something called the Cartwheel Culture, which I assume is something you're very proud of. What is Cartwheel Culture?
Oh gosh, it is one of the things I'm so proud of. Cartwheel Culture is what we ended up naming our culture. I talk about this a lot, the importance of culture. You heard me talk about it all the way back at Alex Medical. I think it is the X factor. It is the secret sauce. Yes. It is the thing that separates one company from the next. And it's hard to describe it. It's hard to teach people how to do it. But when you know it, you're in it and you feel it, it's there. And what I tell people is culture is a verb. Culture is a thing that you do. It's not a noun. It's a thing that everyone has to be active in. It's not a CEO tops down thing. It is everyone in the company working together to build this culture that we all love.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to work at a place where they cannot wait to get to work in the morning, where they wake up and they're like, I can't wait to get there. Yeah. Everyone felt that way for years. It wasn't just like a little bit of time. It was over a decade of this is just so fun. I can't believe they're paying us to do this. It was like that. So how did the cartwheel come about? Super quick. I'm a cartwheeler. I've always been a cartwheeler. It was back to the dance background and all that stuff. And so Tumblr, I did circus arts for a long time. And so one sales meeting early on, we'd done like $4 million in revenue that year, which was like amazing.
Right.
And so I come running out on stage and I just do a cartwheel because I'm so excited. Just felt like the thing.
You did a cartwheel?
I just like ran out on stage and I did a cartwheel. And then I went up to the, grabbed the microphone, started talking, to the team and whatever. And at that same meeting, one of the guys in the audience raised his hand and said, hey, Erica, I love the culture here. But what I see in all of these companies is over time and as we get bigger, the culture deteriorates. How are you, Erica, going to hang on to this culture that we all love? What are you going to do about it? How are we going to maintain this thing that we love? And I say, we're going to stay flexible. We're going to focus on our core. We're going to focus on what's important to us. We are going to be courageous because one of the things that is most important in this company is that we take some risk and that we are courageous. And it takes a lot of courage to throw your whole body weight upside down. Yeah. And, your entire body lands for a moment on one hand. Then the second hand goes down, right? So that's a lot on one hand. Don't think about it too much. Then you'll never do it again. But anyway, so we're going to muster our courage. And you can see where this goes. And this guy says to everyone, well, that's it then. We're going to have the cartwheel culture. And from there, it was just born. And it was, be persistent, be flexible, have courage, lend a hand. Yeah. focus on your core strengths.
And
those became the tenets. And they were it was everywhere. It was buttons. It was little things on the wall. It was T-shirts. It was awards at the end of the year. You get a persistent award or a flexible award or a courage award. I mean, it was everywhere in our culture. And because we could name it and brand it and label it, we could live it.
I love that. I love it. I thought it was going to be like, something like hands, everybody's out doing their own thing. But
we did have this amazing iconography around the Cartwheel Culture where we took pieces of our logo that were arrow shaped and made Cartwheel Man. And it all worked together miraculously.
Wow. Fantastic. I mean, as you think about Silk Road, just in general, like something to be really, really proud of.
Yeah.
And I can imagine the people and the teams and the culture are probably at the top of the list of what you're proud of.
For sure.
That's great. So next chapter, I can't imagine that you're sitting on a beach anywhere. You don't seem like the type. Is there anything that you can share with what this next chapter is going to look like for you?
Yeah. Well, there is this tendency to say, I'm just going to go take a nap for like a really long time. Yeah. But the problem is I couldn't take a nap because we were moving out of California. And so there was like the purging process, which turned out to be incredibly therapeutic, by the way.
Yeah.
But I'm at that point in my life where I can help other CEOs and other leaders. And so I've been on, 5 to 6 boards since I left. Mm-hmm. And some of them have already exited, extraordinarily successfully. Have had my hand in all kinds of different diseases, from cancer to back-end ophthalmology to orthodonture to women's health. I'm back full circle helping Medicine 360, doing the nonprofit work again. And I love it. I love the board work. It occupies me, 20 to 30 hours a week. I'm chairing a bunch of committees, all of that stuff that comes along with being on boards. I'm also helping entrepreneurs, not as a board member, just kind of advising and helping people. Great. Trying to do some of that in the upstate region where there's a strong medical community, lots of medical schools and people with great ideas, and lots of science and engineering schools with great ideas. So trying to bring those ecosystems together, which has been super fun. Trying to create a West Coast ethos up in upstate New York, which has been great. And then, working on some personal goals of cans that I kicked down the road for years. One of which is to become a legitimate pianist. And I'm spending a lot of time playing piano.
Well, Erica Rogers, I can't thank you enough for your time.
It's been a great pleasure.
You've had an exceptional impact on so many patient lives.
Thank you.
Again, something to really be proud of.
Thank you.
And I hope that many entrepreneurs, leaders can learn from your wisdom. So
I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.